When I first heard about Hell Is Us, it looked like just another Souls-like game. But I gotta tell you, after I played the demo, I've quickly found out that one, it wasn't a Souls-like, and two, it was so much more than a third-person action-adventure game. Today, we dive into my review for Hell Is Us. Is it worth your time and money? Let's find out. As I said, Hell Is Us is a third person action adventure game with melee focused combat, exploration, puzzle solving, and light RPG elements in a semi open world. Our story begins with our character Remy sneaking his way back into the war torn country of Hadia in order to go back to his hometown of Jova to find his parents. All we know is that our mother smuggled us out of Jova as a child, and our father was the blacksmith of Jova. We discover along the way that the chaotic and bloody history of Hadia has spawned creatures who are manifested by raw emotions rage, grief, ecstasy, and terror. As we make our way through the game, we uncover the history of not only our family, but also the history of Hadia and what exactly happened there. A viewer very accurately described Hell Is Us when we played the demo. They said it was a Silent Hill atmosphere, Neo combat, Returnal music, Resident Evil puzzles, and Zelda dungeons all mixed into one. And that description is pretty spot on. So the game is definitely not a Souls like, but has some definite inspirations from the genre. For me, just being dropped into a massive world to explore with not much direction reminded me a lot of Bleak Faith, and I think you all know how I feel about that game. There is a lot of dialogue and reading documents in the game, however, I never felt bothered or not interested in it as I sometimes do in other games. The developers taken a very old school approach to Hell Is Us. They feel, and I agree, that games these days have become quite handholdy, if that's a word, with quest markers and maps. Therefore, Hell Is Us features no quest markers, no map, it's just you and the world. It's up to you to pay attention to what NPCs tell you in terms of directions or what they want or need. Personally, I am a very detail oriented person, so I was able to retain and remember a lot of things. However, I still used a notebook alongside to write things down to remember. There are plenty of quests for citizens, known as good deeds, and mysteries to uncover. You'll need to pay attention to documents you pick up, as a lot of times these will give you clues or codes on how to solve puzzles within the world, or for a straight up progression of the game. The whole take on things was extremely refreshing and enjoyable for me. There's just something about being able to figure out the puzzles in the game. Zones are pretty large, so there's a lot of exploration to be done, and it's extremely addicting and enjoyable. My playthrough clocked in at about 41 hours, and if you watch the streams, I was pretty thorough, but I honestly still only had 60% trophy completion after all that. I'd imagine to get 100% trophies, it would be probably about 60 hours or so. You will have to be cautious in your progression through the game, though, because if you progress the story too far, you'll fail some of the quests. This happened to me, and it's unfortunate because there was a trophy related to one quest, so I'd have to do an entire other playthrough to get that trophy. There is also no New Game Plus mode after completing the game. If there are unfinished things you have to do after completing the game, when you load up your save, you'll just be at the end of the game prior to the ending. Combat, sadly, is one of the weakest points of the game. There's not a lot of enemy variety, unfortunately, and for the most part, the combat isn't super challenging considering there is a healing pulse mechanic, much like key pulsing from Neo, that you can constantly gain health back. You have 4 weapon classes to choose from, and depending on the associated emotion your weapon has been imbued with, that is the type of glyphs, which you can think of those as gems to slot into your weapons that give you special abilities that you can slot in. Weapons level up during combat, and you can also upgrade the weapon grade of the weapon at the blacksmith after finding forging tomes. In terms of RPG elements, there is defensive gear that we can equip that gives bonuses, as well as an active and passive relic slot that gives bonuses as well. There isn't a huge variety of builds per se that you can do, but there are still some good synergies for you can create for combat. The emotions that weapons are imbued with don't affect enemies of any particular emotion, but I think a rock, paper, scissors emotional elemental weakness system may have been a way to spice up combat a bit. You have a drone that's with you throughout your whole journey in the game, and that also has abilities you can weave into combat as well. Sound design is great in the game. All sounds are crisp and realistic. Ambient music throughout the world is appropriate and very eerie to fit the atmosphere. World design is very well done as well. Lots of interconnectivity and shortcuts within zones, and each area is very distinct from the rest. The dungeons all look kind of similar because they're all dark and catacomb like, but still distinct in their own way. I also had no issues with the game on PS5 and performance mode whatsoever. So is Hell is Us worth your time and money? Yes, I absolutely believe it is if you're the type of person who heavily leans into exploration and puzzle solving and doesn't mind combat taking a backseat. To me, the fact that combat was a weak point was unfortunate, but other aspects of the game certainly made up for that. The game is priced at $50, and in my opinion, it's worth every penny, since it will probably take you about 20 hours to complete the story, even if you aren't being super thorough. With all this being said, I'm going to give Hell is Us a 9 out of 10. If the combat was more engaging, this for sure would have been a 10 out of 10 game for me. But I would recommend the game fully if anything I've said here intrigues you. That is going to do it for my review of Hell is Us, but let me know in the comments your thoughts on the game. Have you played? Does this review help you make a purchase decision? I certainly hope it was helpful. So hopefully you're all doing well. Stay tuned, and more coming at you. Take care.